Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. We will continue looking at this beautiful sutta that is from a very old part of the scriptures, the Theravada scriptures. It's from the Sutta Nipada, one of the oldest books. And it's the Mangala Sutta. And Mangala means blessing. And we have a ardent, beautiful meditator, community member who has a name, Sumangala, which in Su Pali means good, and Mangala is blessing. And it's true. She's a great blessing. Her name could even be translated good, which is interesting from, I'll talk to you later. Good. What a beautiful name. And yes, we're looking at good things. And last week we talked about the first two verses of this sutta, where the Buddha is responding to this question of what makes up happiness? What does it look like? And basically the Buddha, in all the verses that follow, answering this question to this deva, outlines the Noble Eightfold Path and what that looks like when it's lived out in a life. And the first two verses that we looked at last week are really talking about right view and right intention. And the two verses that we'll look at today are addressing right livelihood, actually, and right speech. Two of the three parts of the morality part of the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm going to actually draw from Ajahn Brahmali's translation of these two verses because I think it's the most accurate to the Pali and very accessible. So the first verse is in Ajahn Brahmali's translation: to be educated and to have a vocation, to be well trained in one's chosen field, and to speak words that are well spoken. These are the highest blessings. So these three things: to be educated and to have a vocation, to be well trained in one's chosen field, and to be speaking words that are well spoken. These are building blocks. These are aspects of living a good life and of happiness. And I think for all of these components that the Buddha describes, making up a good life, there's two possible responses that we can have. One is perhaps just a reframe of our own life the way it is, that we understand, oh, this is valuable, this is important, this is wholesome, this is beautiful. This is, there's a passage often in the sutta that talks about what's praised by the wise. So this is praised by the wisest. This is praised by the Buddha. And the second possible response is, if this isn't very strong in our lives, then we can look at that and we can perhaps reprioritize. So the first one is we perhaps reframe, and the second one is perhaps we do some reprioritizing in our own life. But this beautiful part of a happy life, to be educated and to have a vocation, to have some skills, to be able to, then exist in the world, be able to support ourselves, to have an education and to have a vocation, and to be well trained in one's chosen field. this really is linked to the verse that comes before it about living in suitable places. And we do. This is, I think, for most of us, this is really a reframe that we take stock and appreciate more fully, more deeply the opportunities that most of us had in our lives, growing up where we've grown up, perhaps being in the families that we've been in, access to education. Think about the world. Think about so many countries. Think about what's going on now, and the person that comes to my mind is Malala Yousafzai. And probably most of us know this is a Pakistani woman now, but when many years ago, when she was a girl, was shot in Pakistan by the Taliban. And she was born into a family. Her father had really instilled in her that she could do anything in female form, and she was active spokesperson at like age 10, 11 for education for girls in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And there were many death threats, many threats to her life because she was speaking okay, that's my opinion, because she was speaking the truth, but because of the purity, really the purity of that voice. And so it was strong and often a strong voice, a pure voice, a noble voice, a true voice. There can be a lot of forces against that in samsara, in the world that we live in. And I want to read, because it's better for Malala to speak for herself, because I just cannot possibly do it justice. And this is from when she was 16 and she was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but he was asking her about this time in her life before the shooting, when all of these death threats were very prevalent. And Malala answers, I started thinking about that, that people want me dead. I started thinking about that. And I used to think that the Talib would come, this gunman, and he would just kill me. And then I said, if he comes, what would you do, Malala? And she's preparing. This is an 11-year-old. Then I would reply to myself, Malala, just take a shoe and hit him. But then I said, if you hit a Talib with your shoe, then there would be no difference between you and the Talib. You must not treat others with cruelty and that much harshness. You must fight others, but through peace and through dialogue and through education. Then I said, I will tell him how important education is, and that, quote, I even want education for your children as well. And then I will tell him, that's what I wanted to tell you. Now do what you want. She was 11 or 12, thinking this through. Education, it's something that we can be so grateful for, and think of people that have risked their lives just to have access to it, and then made their lives, a advocate so that others will have access, others on all sides, including Taliban families. And now there's, the Malala Fund, and she's a world advocate, the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. To be educated and have a vocation. What a beautiful reframe for all of us. so inspiring and uplifting, and to be well trained in one's chosen field. I want to give one more example, just because this is around the world, and we have, almost every one of us, been born in a suitable place and have access to amazing education, amazing opportunities. This is from Caracas, Venezuela, and this is a very, very inspiring TED Talk from 2009, where the founder of the El Sisma, El Sis, sorry, El Sistema Music Revolution was awarded a prize and given funding for this project. And this is the largest, most successful youth orchestra in the world. It's in Caracas, Venezuela. And this program has now been imported. I learned after I gave this talk on Tuesday, it's even in Edmonton for low, and I'm sure other cities in Canada, for children across that don't have access to these opportunities, that are in much more dire circumstances. And this is Jose Antonio Abreu. And in the TED Talk, translated from Spanish, obviously, he speaks, and he's describing this program. Within the family, the parent's support is unconditional. The child becomes a role model for both their parents, and this is very important for a poor child. Once the child discovers they're important to their family, they begin to seek new ways of improving themselves and hope better for themselves and their community. Also, they hope for social and economic improvements for their own family. All this makes up a constructive and ascending social dynamic. The large majority of our children belong, as I already mentioned, to the most vulnerable strata of the Venezuelan population. That encourages them to embrace new dreams, new goals, and progress in the various opportunities that music has to offer. The huge spiritual world that music produces in itself, which also lies within itself, ends up overcoming material poverty. From the minute a child's taught how to play an instrument, they're no longer poor. They become a child in progress, heading for a professional level, who will later become a full citizen. Needless to say that music is the number one prevention against prostitution, violence, bad habits, and everything degrading in the life of a child. A few years ago, historian Arnold Toynbee, said that the world was suffering a huge spiritual crisis, not an economic or social crisis, but a spiritual one. I believe that to confront such a crisis, only art and religion can give proper answers to humanity, to humankind's deepest aspirations, and to the historic demands of our time. Education, the synthesis of wisdom and knowledge, is the means to strive for a more perfect, more aware, more noble, and more just society. Education. And I mean, of course, the Buddha knew that and teaches us that. And to speak words that are well spoken, this huge part of our spiritual practice. Training the mind, this will train what comes out of the mind in verbal form, right speech, right action, right livelihood. And this part of the Noble Eightfold Path, like everything the Buddha taught, lists, but they're wonderful. They help us to understand reality. And so right speech, this component of the Noble Eightfold Path, the drop-down menu has four parts. And for me, early days, when I was trying to navigate and learn many of these lists and learn the teachings that the Buddha gave, I realized, I can remember right speech alphabetically. So F, G, H, and I. These four components, and I'll offer it because then I think you can know it as well. And the first is the most important, and that's not to utter false speech. F for false. And this is actually so important that it's a precept. It's one of the 5 precepts of ethical living. Not to utter speech that is false. And the Buddha talks about, sometimes our motivation for speaking words that are false they're they need to be looked at. It's either for our own end or for another's end, or then the Buddha says, or some trifling worldly end. It's trifling. The truth is paramount, and anything less than the truth it's just like junk from the dollar store, and let's get it out of our lives. And this is a process, where as you progress on the path, even your understanding of what is true and what's true for you gets clearer and clearer and clearer. A very important part of our spiritual practice. And for me, when for a time, I would just make a practice of going back and correcting. Like, even if I misspoke, then I could explain. I misremembered that. And after I realized I exaggerated. Or if I literally misspoke, if I knew when I was saying it that it was an exaggeration, that I'm trying to, make myself look better or make my point stronger. We do this. Or for me, quite a bit of habit energy around making something funnier. But that's not really what happened. That's not completely accurate. Go back and correct it. And that has really helped me because it's absolutely humiliating, especially when you have to do it over and over with the same person. Yeah, it's terrible, but it works. It worked for me. It is working for me. False. And then the next one is FG, gossip. And very, very beautiful what the Buddha says about this divisive, malicious habit and practice that many of us have of gossip. The Buddha describes many times, well, anytime he's talking about right speech, and he elaborates it. And this particular time, I'm just drawing from the Middle Length Discourses, Sutta 114. But anytime the Buddha is really elaborating the Noble Eightfold Path and this component, right speech, he uses this description for not speaking maliciously, divisively, gossip, that we give up gossip, we give up divisive speech, and we don't repeat in one place what we heard in another so as to divide people against each other. Instead, we reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote harmony. A beautiful description of and like all of the teachings, this is the what not to do. And then you can do the positive. You can repeat here what you heard over there if it's conducive for harmony, if it's going to encourage people, if it's going to strengthen connections. And we've all probably met people in our lives that have this naturally, oh, you know, so and so told me this beautiful thing that you did. It strengthens the relationship. It's a very, very beautiful habit. Not false speech, not gossip, and then FGH, not harsh. So the they get like so much of the teaching, they get more refined. The really coarse one is if it's false, and then pretty coarse is if it's divisive. And then the next two are slightly more benign, but the goal is to have speech that is not harsh, speech that is gentle. And the Buddha's description, again, anytime that he's talking about elaborating, filling out the Noble Eightfold Path, he has this beautiful description of speech that is gentle, speech that is not harsh. And I think it's probably 30 times in the canon. And then there's this one passage where the Buddha uses the exact same description of this gentle speech when he's giving a metaphor of us training our own minds. So this is speech that is gentle that we're to be aiming for and learning and practicing with one another and with ourselves. And both these practices, it's a feedback loop. They support one another. The more I become gentle and compassionate and accepting and tender and supportive of myself, the more I'm going to be that way with others, and vice versa. And so these six adjectives, I've said these so many times because I love them so much, and they've helped me. And the Buddha talks about this gentle speech. It's the first word is it's gentle. Not harsh speech, it's gentle. It's gentle, it's pleasing to the ear. It's it's lovable as goes to the heart. And it's courteous. And it's desired and by many and agreeable to many. And inner and outer speech. May we be going in this direction with one another and with ourselves. And then the fourth, idle, not false, not gossip, not harsh, not idle, pointless, pointless speech, filling the air with sound waves. And this is something, we have a lot of conditioning around, and again, we can perhaps look at this area of our life and renegotiate with some people in our lives, maybe some people we live with, maybe some people we work with, that I think it's helpful to make it explicit, because at times in our social dynamics, silence can be interpreted as um, aloofness or lack of care or even anger. And if we can perhaps renegotiate with some people in our lives that, hey, let's we don't have to always be talking. We can flow in the mornings through the kitchen and make the coffee, and it can be loving and warm, but we can stay with our own experience, because we need to be supporting one another in this more and more. Not false, not gossip, not harsh, and not idle. To speak words that are well spoken. This is the highest blessing. And when we're around people that have beautiful speech, it's evident that it's a huge blessing. The second verse is to support one's mother and father, to cherish one's partner and children, and to have a job without stress. To support one's mother and father, to cherish one's partner and children, and to have a job without stress. So practical. The Buddha knows to live in harmony is it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Psychologically, emotionally, we have we have to have this. If there's a lot of contention and uh, uh, lack of connection, that this is painful. It hurts our hearts, and it preoccupies us. We're not as freed up as we need to be for our spiritual practice, for our formal meditation practice. To honor one's mother and father, that this is actually part of right view. It is to understand that this is a very comic relationship, parents and children, and it's part of mundane right view that there is mother and father, and it is intricately connected to these five subjects of recollection that the Buddha recommends that we're doing frequently. That I am the heir of my karma. I'm born of my karma. That the parents that I have are to do with me and my karma. I'm born of my karma. I'm related to my karma. I abide supported by my karma. And whatever karma I shall do, whatever action, um, this this will continue to either bring about beauty and goodness in my life and my experience, or not. So this is a very helpful reflection, and it's the truth. And um, so we want to, as much as possible, as much as it depends on us. We are only one side of a relationship, but as much as it depends on us, we want to be in good relationship with our parents and with our children. And at times, often this is wonderful and full of richness and blessings, and at times it's much more difficult than that, and fraught. And as I said, we're only one side of the relationship. And I think how the Buddha's teachings can be helpful is this whole area of honesty, and this whole area of having access to wise association. And so if there's um, like abuse, if there's neglect, if there's some kind of fracture in our relationship with our parents or with our children, I think the first course of action is to be as honest as we possibly can about our own capacity, our own resources, and to um, take care of our own heart. And when we are able to do that, um, it's a game changer. And there are times when we can't be in a lot of contact, or maybe even can't be in contact because the capacity is not there. Um, I don't want to say too much about that. I do want to say, I think with the Buddha's teachings, that this idea of cut off relationship is it is really not ideal. And I think even if we are stepping back in a relationship, or taking time in a relationship, we want to still be really attending to our hearts and working on our hearts and trying to keep them open in whatever way that we can. Even if it's just uh, attending to our own hearts with metta, and then um, moving towards cultivating a heart of metta to to um, perhaps a parent or perhaps a child that it's been very difficult and painful. And to cherish one's partner and children, for many of us, this is just a reframe, to really realize how much of a source of blessing, happiness this is. Uh, I went camping with Anna Garica, Virginia, and Bodhi Paula. I don't know, maybe it was a couple weeks ago, and it was just beautiful. We ended up having quite a lovely connection with a couple that was camping there as well. And honestly, it just landed. It was like, oh, you don't hear this that much. Uh, the the man had made oatmeal, and the woman was eating the oatmeal, and she was so grateful, and it was so sincere, like, thank you, this is so good. And it was just like, oh, this is, you don't, it really, I took note, like, oh, this is such a beautiful thing to be doing, especially if you're together a lot. You're really noticing even the little things, and you're grateful for them. And the last thing that the Buddha is saying in these two verses that we're looking at this morning are to have a job without stress. And this is a high bar. I don't even know if that's possible, but to have a job with manageable stress, I think, is maybe more realistic. And again, for some of us, that's a reframe. For some of us, this might be a reprioritizing, looking at our work situation, and um, if it's extremely stressful, trying to think of ways to address that. And there that would look so different in so many different situations. I know for myself, when I got more and more serious about my meditation, I had a job that was extremely demanding. By the end of the week, I could not barely talk. I was so drained, and it was a fantastic job. I loved it. It was extremely valuable, and then at one point I realized, oh, I'm gonna switch and take a job that is less demanding, less stressful, so that I have more energy that I can put towards meditation. And there was sadness there. It wasn't nearly as interesting. It didn't feel nearly as valuable. Um, and I'm not saying for anyone to do, I'm just saying, like, maybe now in my position, the way that this comes into play is that there are certain things certain duties that I try and limit, and otherwise it just can be overwhelming. I know that Sangamita told me early on in her career, she's a psychiatrist, and initially you were the only psychiatrist in Canmore. Yes? Yeah, that it was just so helpful. She said, look, I realized if I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I still won't meet the need. And I will be useless. So she had enough wisdom that she kept a balance, and it was hard. It took effort, to figure out how to do that, but she did, um, and it is possible, um, and I will end there.
Andamayang Dhammagataya Sadhu Karang Namaste. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
Thank you very much.